Welcome to the ZoomInfo Labs podcast. I'm Ben Salzman.
And I'm Millie Beetham. Today we're thrilled to have James Dyett, head of platform sales at a small but mighty startup. Not sure if you've heard of it. It's called OpenAI.
James is here to unpack his work at OpenAI and the profound impact AI is having on go-to-market. From boosting productivity to shaping new paradigms, James shares insights into how OpenAI is at the forefront of this generational shift.
This is probably one of our favorites, so let's get into it.
Welcome to the ZI Labs podcast. Today is a very special guest. It's a long time coming, and we're excited to introduce James Dyett, who is the head of platform sales at OpenAI. James, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
This is very exciting because you guys are the most impactful company in the world. You're literally changing our lives every day. The way that we work every day is impacted by the work you all are doing. So excited to dive into all things AI, go to market, and we'll take a little bit of a walk down memory lane too and talk about how we met and sort of how it all came to be. But maybe just before we jump into the core content, do a little bit of an introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at OpenAI, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I lead our platform sales team at OpenAI. At OpenAI, we have two products that we sell to businesses. We have ChatGPT for enterprise, and we have the API. The API is for technical buyers that want to build AI into their products and services or automate workflows. And ChatGPT for enterprise is for helping workforces take advantage of AI. So I lead half of our business there. And before OpenAI, I was at Stripe, leading sales teams there. I worked at a company called Castlight Health. And then actually early in my career, I worked at a nonprofit for 5 years that built public-private partnerships to increase water access in Africa. So I've taken a bit of a winding path to where I am today.
First time we met was working on a project together at Stripe, where Gene, who was a leader there and we both know well, said, I'm going to staff some folks on this, and you're going to work together with them at Outbound. We go to your LinkedIn, and I'm like, oh my God, it's like you and John Haddock. I'm like, this is going to be the hardest meeting we ever sat in. Talk to us a little bit about your background. You went to Harvard 3 times, from what I can glean, and then it was like John Haddock. It was like almost laughable how good your LinkedIn is. We were scared, genuinely scared. But talk a little bit about the early work that we were doing at Stripe with you and your time at Harvard as well.
Yeah, it was great. So when you came to Stripe and helped fix our go-to-market motion, at the time we were probably a 10-person sales team. We were working off of the inbound that we were getting, which was considerable. Stripe was in its early days and was doing really well with tech companies. But what we realized is we were going to grow and become the company we wanted to be. We were going to need to start reaching out to prospects, which we'd never done before. Yeah. And we didn't know how to do it because, all the nice things you said about John and my backgrounds, there wasn't a lot of enterprise sales in those backgrounds. Yeah. And so we worked together, and I remember you sort of explaining to us how a great outbound email is written, how we could use the technology at the time, which we were just joking about how these new AI models totally reimagine how you would do outreach to customers. But it was a lot of fun. And my sort of fondest memories there were, in a way, we were figuring out what the Stripe go-to-market voice was. Yeah. And you were helping us, helping challenge us, what do you want your outreach to customers to feel like? Because we all get those, inbound emails that feel robotic, that are super long, that immediately go into the delete column. And we wanted to do things a little bit differently at Stripe. And it was great to sort of iterate and experiment. And where we landed was, and I think continues to this day at Stripe, where it was a very, very short, terse, hey, can we help? Tap, I think you called it a tap on the shoulder style that we used, and ended up being really successful.
And you all were very early on signals. A big part of what we were doing was just figuring out when's the right time to reach out? How do we get actual real context here? And if you have the right context, a shoulder tap can be good enough, right? But to your point, it would have been a very different world if we had all the tools that OpenAI has released since. Talk a little bit about how the transition from Stripe to OpenAI. Obviously, Stripe's an incredible company. You helped build it. It must have been tough decision to leave, but also probably an easy one in some ways, given the nature of OpenAI. Talk to us about that transition.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a funny story. When I joined Stripe in 2016, we were in this old office in the Mission called the Pioneer Building.
The Box Factory, right?
The Box Factory. And it was really beloved by Stripe folks. And we ended up building an office on Townsend Street that was designed with the same center staircase as the Pioneer Building. So everybody loved this office. And as we were leaving the office, a small group of people walked in, and they were taking over the office, and it turned out it was OpenAI. It was about 7 people. Greg Brockman was one of the founders and was actually the CTO and one of the earliest employees at Stripe. So there was some Stripe DNA at OpenAI.
They're like, you can just stay in the building. We'll just keep you.
Exactly. And so so I looked at the website for this company. I thought, well, that's interesting. A nonprofit, but they're a tech company, and making sure AI benefits humanity. I'll sort of keep an eye. They had a lot of really prominent technologists backing the company. I'll keep an eye on them. And over the years, I would sort of check in on what OpenAI was up to. And I think probably 5.5, 6 years after joining Stripe, I get a LinkedIn message from the then head of go-to-market at OpenAI saying, "Sales at OpenAI?" ? This is Zach.
Yeah.
I thought, sales at OpenAI? What is OpenAI selling these days? I didn't even know. I hadn't been keeping track, but I had a lot of respect for the company because I knew all the people behind it and the talent they had. So I sort of, it was one of those LinkedIn emails. I opened it. I'm like, okay, I'm just really curious.
Yeah.
Took the call with Zach and got really in. This was in sort of early 2023. Started going into the AI playground, seeing what GPT-3 at the time, we hadn't launched 4, was doing. This was before ChatGPT, before DALL-E, before GPT-4. I was like, well, this is cool. I can actually see how businesses would use these tools.
Yeah.
And I took the job, but I took the job thinking it would be a lot of, knocking on doors, trying to convince people to pay attention to us. So I accept the job, and I'm taking a couple weeks off between accepting the job and starting, and we launched ChatGPT.
So you had started right before November.
I had accepted the job in November.
Okay.
We launched ChatGPT, and then I start the first week of February. And the context couldn't have been more different than what I expected.
Sure.
I thought I was going to spend the whole time, trying to convince, the Nikes and Disneys and, Spotifys of the world to take a meeting with us. And instead it was, we're going to need a bigger boat. We're going to need to hire really fast.
Yeah.
And we're going to need to figure out how we build a scaled go-to-market motion. So yeah, for me, the lesson was, if you are excited and interested in a product or technology, follow that instinct because, you probably have a really good sense of what customers are going to like, and you also have a good sense of what you're going to enjoy selling. Totally. And both have ended up being true for me.
Yeah.
They always say, right, invest in what you know. It's the same with your time as your money. So that makes a ton of sense. But you just mentioned so you walked into, OpenAI and all of a sudden the context is completely switched and demand is just, a running faucet. You think maybe you're going to come in and sort of apply some of those learnings at Stripe. How has your entire sort of approach to go-to-market strategy and how you're leading the team changed in these sort of first few months?
In a sense, it's actually my Stripe experience has been really helpful because what we had at Stripe was a very technical product. At OpenAI, we have a really technical product. We were selling an API. We're selling an API at OpenAI. We had early success with developers and founders, which was also the case at OpenAI. And we hadn't yet figured out how to engage the enterprise at Stripe, also the case at OpenAI. So in a sense, I felt really lucky. I'd gone to school at Stripe for 7 years on the problem that we now face at OpenAI. But there's also a lot that was really different. At Stripe, you're selling payment software. Payment software existed before Stripe. And so we were reimagining a product that already existed. OpenAI was not an analog that these enterprises had. To the extent they spent on AI, it might have been on older machine learning techniques. But the idea of a natural language processing solution, a large language model, this was brand new.
Yeah.
And so we actually had to spend a lot of time educating customers on how you might use this new technology in the enterprise. That was not a problem we had at Stripe. Stripe, it's you want to process payments, we're just better at it. At OpenAI, it's, okay, we have this technology. And interestingly, every enterprise knew that this technology was important for them, but they didn't quite know in what way or how they should implement this technology. And that became like the core job for our go-to-market team, was bringing enterprises on the journey of what has been a huge technological shift.
And let's just talk a little bit more about that early period when you first launched it. I remember talking to Millie, we're using it, we're like, oh my God, it can write poems, and now my kid's school application, I'm crushing that. Like, there was all the sort of initial things you did. And then it started to be obvious that there was all these use cases that people just didn't even understand. They didn't even try, but if you try it, you got a pretty darn good response. And I just remember saying to Millie, can you imagine their inbound funnel right now? It must be a freaking bonanza, right? So I just tend to think about things from like a sales and marketing perspective, like, wow, what are these reps feeling when they wake up? Describe that feeling of like, you wake up in the morning, you probably check the queue, and there's like hundreds or thousands of the best companies in the world all raising their hand at the same time. How did you handle that? How did that make you feel? Like, walk us through that moment.
Well, okay, it felt, at one point, we had 700,000 unanswered emails.
That's amazing.
And
these are like probably real buyers, like the CTO at Wells Fargo and like whoever.
No, this wasn't spam. These were real things. And so it felt, we actually got a reputation. And at that time, we had something like 5 reps, okay? And so I remember we had a slide in one of our team meetings that, effectively had a tsunami of inbound and then this tiny group trying to manage.
So this is you, Alyssa, Zach, and probably
and a couple other reps, and this huge inbound queue, and we did our best. A lot of those early months were just trying to unblock customers to run on our platform. We didn't have time to do deep discovery with them, to qualify them, to take them on a journey, to do any of that. It was just unblock them to experiment with the tech. So a lot of these companies had enterprise contracting requirements and data requirements that we just had to, get them comfortable with, and then they could go off to the races. So phase 1 was just unblock them to experiment, and we actually got a reputation for being hard to contact. Well, of course we're hard to contact. There's 5 of us, and there's 700,000 emails.
It's a good reputation to have, actually.
And so we did
say SLA's out the window. Right?
Exactly, and it felt. I mean, it's not actually a good feeling as a sales rep, because you, like, the idea of a customer reaching out wanting help and you not having time to respond is one of the worst feelings. Of course, it's a good feeling in the sense of, oh, we know this is a product that customers want, but it's not the go-to-market experience we wanted to give customers. So we knew we had to hire really fast, but there's no way we would hire ourselves out of this problem. No way. So we did start to use our own models to find a way to programmatically respond to customers, mostly in a support context, because a lot of those inbounds were, they were sales emails, but really they were, hey, I'm having trouble with my credit card payment. I'm having trouble understanding what your data policies are. And they actually didn't need to talk to somebody on the phone. They just needed a response. So we started to chip away at that backlog with a internal tool we built on GPT-4. And then we were, obviously with the larger companies that needed to talk to a person, we were identifying those prospects and trying to get on as many 15-minute calls as we could and hiring as fast as we could.
That's how you know, a salesperson who wants to shorten the call to 15 from 30. That's how you know you're really busy, because most sales reps are like, oh, we need a full hour for this. I got a call.
I'll need a follow-up. They hold back the demo on the first call because the second call is, that's the treat they give you. Not that wasn't the first months.
Yep. Let's talk a little bit about some of your leadership principles and what you're seeing from folks that you're, interacting with these days. What's your sense for how, and you talked a little bit about, as we were warming up, sort of how you guys are using AI internally. I want to talk about that too. As you think about just leadership broadly, how has this AI movement and the technology itself helped sort of change the way you think about being a leader and empowering your team? I mean, obviously it's very meta for you all, but just talk a little bit about how I guess, your management principles have shifted from Stripe to OpenAI?
At OpenAI, I tell candidates that selling at OpenAI is different than selling at any other tech company that I've been a part of. And the reason for that is there's a weightiness and gravity to the technology that we're working with. We are trying to bring something into the world that is going to change a lot of things. And with that comes a lot of responsibility. I think our job as a go-to-market organization, a company like OpenAI, is first and foremost to educate customers on what's happening right now. What are these models capable of, and what will they be capable of in the near future?
Yeah.
And so that gravity or weight to our mission is infused in how I think about leadership.
Yeah.
So it's always important to be transparent with your team. It's especially important when the thing that you're selling, going to market with, is as weighty as AI. And I want to coach my team and help them see that we're going to be, I as a leader, I'm going to be very transparent with them on what I know and what we're trying to do as a company, because I expect them to be that way with our customers.
Yeah.
So transparency, like number one, super, super important from a leadership perspective. And the second principle that I've thought about a lot at OpenAI is, and frankly at Stripe before, is people will work for you if they trust you. In a sense, this is coming up a lot with OpenAI and all of the AI companies, is this idea of trust.
Yeah.
Can we trust these AI companies? Can we trust tech companies in general to care for what is beneficial for society? We also need to do that as leaders, because nobody wants to work for you if they don't think that you fundamentally care about them as a human being.
Yeah.
And so if you bring transparency and your team feels, and it has to be genuine, they feel like you actually care about their career progression, you're going to get a lot of leeway on bad strategic decisions. And I've made a lot of bad strategic decisions, but you'll get leeway if you touch those two things, because your team knows you're not perfect. I think a lot of leaders stumble and they try to uphold this veneer of perfection, or, I know the right answer to everything. And your team can see through that really quick. They just want to know how you're thinking about things, and they'll get a sense of your judgment, and they'll be very okay with mistakes as long as they know that you're straight with them.
Yeah.
James, I was going to say, you mentioned that we're going to have to go outbound. Is that because that's part of your sort of like core principle as a go-to-market leader? Like, you believe that there must be an inbound and an outbound function, to be successful in go-to-market, or is there some other sort of like tipping point or lever that you see that, make sure that has to happen at OpenAI?
So I think every company needs to go outbound for a couple reasons. You're going to get the true believers, the companies that already have an interest in your technology. You'll get that via inbound. And that will be a really different sales motion, because you'll start actually like some way down the funnel in conversations with those customers. It can make you, even if you can grow the business at a healthy clip just with inbound, I don't think it makes you the most resilient organization, because going outbound forces you to build the case to customers for why they should care about what you're building. And that actually clarifies, like, what is your value prop? And you're realizing the areas where you're missing as a company only when you go outbound. And so we're going to have to do it both because that's necessary to grow the business, but it's also necessary to know actually how much product market fit do we have with the entire market, not just with the market that has raised their hands and said, we want to talk to you. So, I would love to sharpen ourselves more with a more deliberate outbound motion.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up to that. I feel like that parallels that really nicely. Like, obviously, we all see the reaction in the general market to OpenAI's technology, right? And like that translates directly to your inbound. what is the reaction behind the scenes, like in a real sales cycle? Like, what are you actually seeing from customers? Some of those, like, ideas around, value prop and, tightening in on exactly, the use cases, et cetera. Like, what does that look like in terms of what you're seeing today during that sales cycle?
Sure. Okay. So a typical conversation for me with a prospect will look something like this. The customer comes in and they are filled with ideas of where they can bring AI into their business. Oh, we had an internal hackathon and we came up with a list of 20 GPT-4 powered use cases. My CEO sends me emails every week with a new AI idea. We had a leadership offsite where we discussed what a AI powered, next generation of our business should look like. So there's no shortage of enthusiasm. And I see my job and my team's job is to take that enthusiasm and help customers realize it with the right journey. Most of these customers say, I've got a ton of ideas. You don't need to help me there. What I need help with is, how do I actually do this? How do I build with AI? Most of these customers are used to building with software where, if you input A, you always get B out. Working with AI, as you know, is super different. If you put in A, you'll get B sometimes, you'll get C, you'll get D. That's part of the magic, right? I tell customers the fact that these outputs are probabilistic can be a feature, not a bug, because it's fresh, it's new, and it's able to creatively respond or reason around the prompts you give it. But that makes it really hard to build with and really challenging. And so our job is to help harness this enthusiasm into a plan where they can start to see value quickly. Because we're in a period right now where there's a ton of excitement about AI. I would say 2023 was the year of experimentation. What is this technology? What can it do? How is it changing our business? How is it changing our industry? 2024, I've seen a huge shift in enterprises. All they want is, how do I get value? I need to see ROI and I need to see it yesterday. And so a go-to-market team's responsibility there is to help them get from A to B and suss out which ideas are gonna make them heroes in their company fastest.
Yeah, for sure. And just for the ZoomInfo purposes, we had a hackathon when custom GPTs first came out. It was like within minutes, it was like hackathon. Like, this is going to be amazing. Had probably 40 or 50 people on 10 teams get together, and I had one of those like technology moments where I'm in my hotel room, in Portland, like the night before the hackathon, and I'm like talking to our CRM with the voice assistant, asking her what I should do that day, and I'm like, yes, this is amazing. Like, you just like have those like, oh my God, this is like an aha moment. It can do things that I didn't even imagine. What was your aha moment personally and professionally and obviously it was within the walls probably of OpenAI already, right?
Well, actually, it was when I was considering whether to join OpenAI, okay. And I was in an interview and saw a demo of the product. Mid 2022, the demo took an entire Supreme Court case, put it into the playground. We didn't have ChatGPT at the time, and asked
the playground was the internal name for it at the time.
It was actually, we had exposed it publicly, but it was sort of the developer environment. Yeah. It didn't have that the chat interface built in. You actually would just sort of like press submit for a bunch of text and you get a response based on. And we asked the model to summarize this 60-page Supreme Court in 5 bullets for a 5th grader. And it did it. And I'd read that case for school. And so I knew generally what the summary should be. And it was like bang on. Yeah. And now for us, like, we're 2 years out from that day. Now that's like, oh yeah, duh, of course large language models can read 60 pages in 5 seconds and summarize it like super accurately. But at that moment, it was a bit of a, wait, what is that? It felt like magic. It felt like a, who's behind, like, what's the cut and paste like thing that's happening in the background here? But it was obviously real. And that was the moment where I realized, and this was before ChatGPT, that there were real business applications here. Like I could see, immediately I could see, all right, this is going to be useful for professional services companies. This is going to be useful for finance companies. This is going to be useful for sales teams and marketing teams. And I got super excited because, and this is what is so fun about being in go-to-market and AI, is it would be my job to help companies figure out what to do with this technology. Right. Most of the time when you're in sales, you don't get to be a product manager. Totally. Now the good salespeople do, but here I realized actually, I would need to hire a lot of sales reps that were going to be thinking as product managers. We'd be working like, Ben, you're at ZoomInfo. Let's think about what this tech could do for your business. That's a pretty different conversation than I got to have a lot of times in my career.
That's fantastic. And maybe with these new product launches, especially on multimodal, obviously it's incredible. Stopped my week for a solid half a day to just think about this and play with it. Especially the sort of vision and audio, two-way audio. What do you think are going to be maybe the types of experiences, products, et cetera, that'll be created either in go-to-market or non-go-to-market that maybe folks aren't thinking about? I'm sure this is still very much in the, folks are still just actively figuring this out. But what's your take on how multimodal helps unlock some of the business use cases?
Sure. I think the big improvement we've seen just over the last month or two has been the speed of response for audio. Mm-hmm. If you used ChatGPT 3 months ago and you asked it a question, you'd get the spinning wheel.
You get that little music.
Yeah, effectively. Yeah. And it'd take a couple seconds and it would respond. Yeah. And it was still pretty cool, but it wasn't like having a conversation with the model. As the latency dropped, it wasn't just a linear change in the experience for customers. There's a moment at which it's oh wait, I can talk to this thing. Right. Now you can unlock all sorts of conversational experiences. Where we're seeing a lot of interest here is customer service. Right now, if you call an airline and you ask a question, you really just have to say a word like agent or, refund. And, click, 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 click. Oh, I hear you might be asking for, that's not actually a great customer experience. Nobody thinks that's a great customer experience. But if you talk to the models right now, it is starting to feel like, oh, this could solve a problem for me in a way that's natural. And I think that's going to be the killer use case. So anytime you're having questions as a customer for a business, and that doesn't require a real deep knowledge on the other side, but just a basic understanding of how that business operates. Yeah. I think this is a great opportunity for these models.
Yeah, and Millie and I made a video about the Air.ai demo. Yeah. You should probably see. I'm assuming that's built on ChatGPT.
It is. It's built on it.
And the guy with the pregnant pauses closing the customer to sell him a Vision Pro. It's all of the awkwardness of closing the customer and all those things completely gone. Right?
Yeah, the model probably doesn't feel awkward when it waits for you to continue your thought.
That's right.
James, I'm assuming that you're starting to get more and more complex, maybe ROI sort of questions from customers. Specifically, one of the things I think we've talked to some CEOs about is if there's a ton of this efficiency gain and dollars saved, does that money go back into different functions across the business, spending, more on compute, cloud costs, covering that kind of thing? Or does this sort of business cost structure change over time? Can you react to some of those ROI conversations, questions like this that you're getting from customers? How are you approaching that today?
Yeah, this is something we think about a lot, right? Because if you're providing a tool like ChatGPT Enterprise for your business, you want to know, okay, how is this helping my business? There are ways that we can do this, right? There are studies that look at the speed at which people can complete coding tasks with AI. And it turns out they can code faster and they can code at a higher quality. Yeah. And so we are helping our customers replicate those sort of analyses internally. I think there's also the piece of this that you just feel the difference. So as an example, when companies started moving to email, I'm not sure they ran an ROI of the impact of email on their business and said, this isn't really pencil for us. We're going to go back to fax. Similarly,
Totally.
you think about shared documents on Google Docs, which are amazing. We all couldn't live without shared documents. I'm not sure that the Google sales team said, well, here's the ROI on being able to share your documents versus having to attach a Word document to an email and send it over.
Right.
I think it was just sort of self-evident that this is better.
Totally.
And so I do think you can sort of over-rotate on ROI, and customers will tell you if they feel like this is getting value. And the way they're knowing is they're asking their employees, like, how would you feel if we took this away from you?
Right.
And if the answer is not over my dead body, then you don't have to worry about the ROI calculation. It's like, okay, this is helpful.
What's the ROI of putting internet in our office? Well,
right.
It's like air.
And nobody runs those calculations, but they just know this is really helpful to us. And so I do think we need to figure out how to help our customers build the business case.
Yeah.
I also think we should just keep our focus on adding a ton of value to the end user because we don't need to put a dollar against that if the end user is just like, this is amazing.
100%.
Because it's not that expensive.
Right. Yeah. And
the meaningful behavior change is really interesting because that's exactly what it is. It's like, okay, if there's meaningful behavior change and everybody feels that, it's self-evident, the value.
Totally.
That's fascinating.
Talk to us a little bit about, to me, some of the magic in the experiences that we're building for customers or the things we do internally are combining first-party data and third-party data together. It's almost like I was joking with our CEO last night that it's almost like seeing yourself on TV, right? It's like no matter how few viewers there were, if you're on the Giants game and you catch a foul ball, it's like, that's amazing. It's like same thing when you see your own data interacting with AI of like, whoa, look at me in there, right? Maybe just talk to us a little bit about how you think about, unifying first and third party data, because that to me is the sort of the core of what's being unlocked for almost all of these use cases. Because if it's just one or the other, it sort of lacks that, continuity.
Absolutely. Okay. Here's one way I would think about that. If you weren't bringing your company's data to bear, then you should just use the free version of all these models that are out there, and have your employees ask questions and get responses, and you'll get some improvement in productivity or workflow automation. But to really have it make a difference for your company, you have to bring your data to bear, and that's where these models really start to feel like a custom model for your end customers. That's what everybody wants. They do not want generic ChatGPT. They want ChatGPT for their business that talks like their business, that understands the vocabulary that each business uses, that knows the style and tone that your business tends to operate with. Then it starts to feel not like ChatGPT, but as the insert company name assistant.
Yes.
And that's where we want to get. And to get there, though, you have to bring a lot of data to bear. So you all are doing a ton of that for go-to-market teams. But there are companies out there that are trying to do that for finance teams. They're trying to do that for operations teams. So it's a lot of fun to see these assistants proliferate.
Yeah. And just one example for us, we rolled out this thing called Account AI, where we basically combine all the CRM data of products, usage, what they're doing with ZoomInfo, and all the third-party data, who's changing jobs, what signals, intent, surges, et cetera. And what we'll do, Millie and I will often, it's so mean, but it's so fun, is we'll ask the rep and the bot at the same time, what's going on with this account and what should I talk to them about? And the rep's like tying their shoes, getting ready to start talking, and this thing's like, and it's just like, oh my God, what an unfair fight. It's just amazing to see.
So you're doing exactly what I tell these customers. A lot of times you'll see companies look at AI and an AI-driven solution and basically see how well it does relative to like 100% score. Oh, the AI was 95% correct based on the policies that we have for addressing these sort of questions. The right way, in my opinion, to think about that is, how did the AI compare to people on that particular task? And a lot of times companies haven't measured the performance of people on that task. And so I was talking to a very large telco company that was looking at how the AI compared to their team on answering a certain subset of support questions. Yeah. And at first they actually just looked at the AI and they said, like 80%, that's not great. And then we sort of encouraged them, well, what's really important is like, how are they doing relative to the team that's currently answering that? And they hadn't measured it. They learned, oh, wow, we're not answering in compliance with our own policies like 45, 50% of the time.
Totally.
This could be a really helpful tool for the team.
Yeah.
And so I think that's exactly the right way to do it. And the rep, by the way, you don't hire the rep to go read a bunch of background on the account. You hire the rep to do all the challenging, like discovery, qualification, negotiation, et cetera. So the rep is probably fired up because that's also why you go into sales. Most people in sales do not go into sales to write account plans or to write briefing notes before they talk to a customer. Yeah. They want to hear customer problems. They want to pull that out of the customer and then present a solution. And now they're able to start that much faster than they would have otherwise.
Totally. And like Millie and I are often brought in to talk about account strategy and AI. How do we come in and have a great conversation around AI? I don't want to talk about, hey, give me the latest. I want to just talk about the strategy, and now we just fast forward to the good part, right?
100%.
So totally agree. I have so many other questions, Millie. I want to make sure that you get yours in too.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I feel like we're sort of like circling around this, but like, what's maybe one of the most surprising things that you found sort of selling to these large companies? It could be good, bad, but I feel like we've sort of circled around this question. But is there something that's coming up that's like consistently like, wow, I can't believe that this question's being asked, or they don't understand X, or they can't see the forest through the trees?
I think the most surprising thing is actually the opposite, which is everybody knows this is a big deal. So if you look historically at what has been the pattern of adoption of new technologies, it usually starts with the early adopter. We all know about sort of the crossing the chasm concept, right? It starts with the early adopters, the technologists, the startup founders, the forward-thinking companies. And then, a couple of years pass, and then there's sort of the sort of middle of the market, and they kind of figure it out. And then at the very end, there are these sort of stragglers, and they only get to it like, a decade later. And my understanding from folks who saw the transition to cloud or to mobile is like, basically that was the pattern. It took years for, the slowest moving Fortune 500 to even pay attention to this stuff. Yeah. So the part that's most surprising to me is like, that's not what we're seeing at all. Like every single Fortune 500 company knows they need to be thinking about this and is actually doing stuff. Yeah. That is not normal for a technological change, like a big platform shift. And everybody's doing that at the same time. So my theory on why this is ChatGPT was launched around a holiday. A bunch of executives are sort of hearing about this and playing with it over, Thanksgiving and Christmas and thinking, oh shit, this could help my business. And they're telling their team, we need to move on this fast. Yeah. I think that's forced a lot of AI companies to move up market way faster than they otherwise would have. And it's put us in a position as OpenAI where we're competing with the hyperscalers for the same accounts, which typically is, if you're a startup, you're actually sort of being ignored by the competition, especially the largest companies in the world, up until you've actually established a go-to-market motion and you've built a nice business and you know how to operate it. We were suddenly flung into competition with these Fortune 500 companies alongside we're competing against the hyperscalers, and that was like the equivalent of 3 months into the startup's life. Right. So that has been surprising. It's forced us to operate as a really different organization.
Yeah. What's it like to work at OpenAI? I assume there's an immense sense of pride, right?
The feeling is that what we're doing matters. And part of that is, yes, the popularity of the technology, but it's also this recognition that we're, Sam says, the models are dumber today. The models will never be this dumb ever again. Right. And so there's a bit of a sense of like, this is cool where we are right now, but we're going to go to some pretty wild places with this technology. And it's our job to help essentially the entire enterprise market get used to that, adapt to it, understand what this means for them, and there's a pride, but there's also a responsibility. Like, oh, our customers are really counting on us to help them here, and so I think there's we try to make it fun. But it's not a playful job in the way that I've had in the past, where it's like, oh, this is fun, cool software. No, this is heavy stuff. And the people who tend to be attracted to come to OpenAI really believe that this is an important thing, and that it's probably, from a sales perspective, probably the most meaningful opportunity they might have in their careers.
For sure. And talk a little bit, if you can, talk a little bit more about working with Sam and his sort of leadership style. He's clearly a brilliant technologist, once in a century type of entrepreneur, but he's also an incredible marketer. Sometimes when I hear him speak at these events or doing interviews, I'm like, he has a natural sense for building intrigue and storytelling and such. Just talk to us a little bit about, working for Sam.
I think that what Sam is really good at, and the culture he's built at OpenAI, is understanding what all these different stakeholders need from us as a company and from him as a leader, and trying to address each of them. And we are always going to fail to meet the mark for some of these stakeholders. But that's something that we've really tried to bring into the company. There are people at OpenAI who are terrified of what AI will bring. There are people that are excited, and most people are both at the same time. Sure. And Sam's job is to make sure that all of those views have a seat at the table. And that's, I think, my job as a leader as well. More than other companies I've been at, where there might be more uniformity in what everybody wants to achieve. I think that's one thing that isn't always captured by the outside world about OpenAI, which is it's actually a place with a ton of diversity of points of view about the future of AI. A lot of people come to OpenAI to work on AI precisely because they're concerned about its direction. And then there are people who come because they are thrilled about its direction. And both people coexist and work with each other.
And they can shape the direction. Really,
100%.
Right? Like, it's like if they can help put their finger on the scale one way or the other, they feel like they're helping to do something for society.
Totally. And you see that in how Sam communicates too, where he'll be up on Capitol Hill one day talking about how we're mitigating the concerns with AI technology. And at this, he'll probably later that day go talk to a bunch of startup founders who are fired up about what they're going to bring into the world with these models. And I think we try to do that as a company generally, is hold both those things in our head at the same time.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, I'm a committed accelerationist, so bring it on.
Very good.
Let's go a couple more fun ones, and then we'll get you out of here. We could go all day, James. Again, thank you for doing this. One is, I think, I've known a lot of the folks at Stripe over time, some of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with. It must be interesting to see a lot of them empty out of Stripe into OpenAI, but then some into Anthropic and some of your other competitors. What's that like? What are the ex-Stripe dinners like, when you all get together?
Oh, it's so fun. Kate Jensen is a really good friend of mine. She leads sales and partnerships over at Anthropic. And we tend not to talk about business when we connect, but I know that she's building an amazing team over there, that she is an awesome leader. And so I think about every day, okay, if we're going to be able to be competitive in the marketplace, we've got to be as good as whatever Kate Jensen's building at Anthropic, and that's a pretty high bar. So that's been fun to just see a lot of my former Stripe colleagues get involved in AI in some degree. One of my good friends from Stripe, Rob Soliterman, leads the sales team over at Harvey, who's a customer of ours, and really exciting
legal startup. Right?
AI for the legal space. So it keeps you on your toes, and then you also know that you're not bringing some unique special sauce from Stripe that only OpenAI has. That those lessons are being incorporated into all your competitors' businesses as well. So you've got to then up your game and think about, okay, what's the new thing that we're going to do at OpenAI that's different from anything we've done in the past?
Yeah. Where do you see your career growing? Clearly, if you're as successful as you have been in the first few years, you're going to build an amazing thing and probably be there for a long time. What does success look like to you 5 and 10 years down the road?
Yeah. So I think about somebody like Richard Alfonsi, who was the CRO at Stripe when I was there, and now works with companies at First Round Capital. And what
Is he a partner there?
Yeah, he's an operating partner.
Oh, awesome! I didn't know that. Great.
Yeah, it's awesome. And when I think, I don't exactly know what direction my career will go, but if I can have the sort of impact that somebody like Richard has had, where he's not only built and scaled enormous teams, but he's now mentoring leaders and sharing everything that he's learned, and sort of being in the background of all these new successful revenue leaders and entrepreneurs. I think that would be a lot of fun and really meaningful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And this is our sort of traditional last question or motif that we have on every podcast. Who is the smartest person you've ever known, and what did you learn from them that you took forward from spending time with them?
I'm going to go with Pascal Noel, who's an economics professor at the University of Chicago, and also one of my best friends, and the father to my godson.
Oh, nice.
He spent the early part of his career in the White House on the National Economic Council, and has just got his PhD in economics at Harvard. Brilliant guy. And what I learned from him is, so this guy is so smart that he could get incredibly technical with me if he were ever trying to explain a policy area, but he never did. And what he was able to do was explain something really complicated in accessible ways. And I think that is like a useful skill for anybody. Yeah. If you can take something complicated and communicate it clearly, you're going to be so much more effective in a meeting, in a business, in your personal life than the person who takes the complicated thing and makes it seem complicated. Totally. And I think that as as people sort of progress in their career, they start by trying to make the complicated thing seem more complicated because that makes us feel good. Okay, we can use words that the other person doesn't know, but it actually isn't going to help you add value. And Pascal he's a teacher. I'm sure he gets to use this every day, but he teaches business school students about complicated economics topics. And so he has to be able to understand it so well that he can explain it in simple, clear terms. And that's something I try to do as a sales professional.
I was going to say, when I first met you, one of the things that was most compelling and really stuck with me is like, I'm looking at your LinkedIn and you're in John's LinkedIn, but the way that you all very clearly, concisely explain things in a simple way, it sounds like that's really impacted you. I give you the same credit. Like, you're obviously an incredibly brilliant person. And I'm not just saying this because you're on the podcast, but your ability to crisply explain things, I think, is one of your superpowers. So
cool. Well, thank you, Pascal.
Yeah, there you go. Well, thank you again, James, for coming on the ZoomInfo Labs podcast. This has been truly an honor to spend time with you here. And as I said, as we were warming up, I don't say this about many companies every decade, but genuinely changed my world every day. And the work that we're doing with customers is just night and day compared to even 2 years ago. So kudos to you all for the incredible impact you have on society and our daily jobs.
Thanks for everything you guys do, Ben. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the ZoomInfo Labs podcast.
For more from ZoomInfo Labs, subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me and Ben on LinkedIn and visit zoominfo.com/labs to get in touch.